So my name is Patrick Osborne. My responsibility here is in the areas of product management and marketing. I do a couple other things too, functionally within the group. I've been at HPE for about 8 years. I came by way of an acquisition, and before that I spent a lot of time at Sun Microsystems. So I was very sad about all the stuff going on with Spartan Solaris this last year. It's been kind of difficult to watch that from the sidelines, but c'est la vie, the market moves on, right? So I'm going to share with you some thoughts today and some ideas that we have around data protection and availability. So I'd say for the pundits in the room, please be kind. We'll try to make this as interactive as possible, and I'm happy to answer as much or as many questions as you guys have, and I definitely love the furious debate. So that was a really good movie, by the way. So some of the areas that we're working on this year in this area of, some people call it secondary storage, some people call it data protection and availability. It can be sort of a catch-all in some cases, sort of that not primary storage area. What couple of themes that we're seeing, and you all may be seeing some of the same things as too, is I'm starting to see a further stratification of the data layer, right? Where you've got a number of different solutions that have different cost and performance and scale points that are great tools in the bag. The bag is getting bigger, right, and harder to lug around in some cases. So we're starting to see that a little bit. And maybe that'll get consolidated again back in the future with this last concept that I'll talk about. Certainly a lot is going on in the application centricity world in terms of being able to provide data protection and availability specifically tied to the app, or at least have it show up as a parlance of the person who's managing that application or understands, what it takes to manage that application. Usually they know best about availability and what some of those requirements and SLAs are. One thing that I definitely see, and we're doing a lot of work on with the engineering team, is to make a lot of these things essentially invisible and integrated. I think what you're seeing is a lot of folks, and I know in Matt's presentation on the SimpliVity side, right, they've tried to make it as invisible and integrated as possible in the SimpliVity architecture. You're starting to see that a lot of these things being driven into the primary storage from a data protection availability standpoint. So making that not to have a PhD in sort of in some of these concepts, because the days of sort of dedicated backup admins and a whole team that's going to sit around and just focus on that is that's no longer an investment model that customers are making in some cases. The consumption model, certainly for secondary storage, is driving a lot of change. We're trying to offer up as many solutions as possible in our portfolio that have consumption-based pricing and acquisition, and they behave that way. Certainly hybrid cloud use cases, I think that's what you'll see is, as cloud comes in and you want to provide hybrid cloud use cases, secondary storage is definitely a place where, a lot of customers are considering this area. And then this concept of, there's a lot of folks in the industry call it this. I think Enrico is one of the guys that, coined this term as well, this concept of flash and trash, right? So, hot data, right, sitting on flash, maybe moving to storage class memory, depending on what your position is on that. But essentially a limitless pool of erasure encoded large form factor HDDs, mainly server based, as the final landing spot for a lot of that data is certainly where a lot of folks are going. So I'm going to talk a little bit about our portfolio. We're very highly invested as a company in primary block and primary unified storage, right? We talked a little bit today about Nimble. We talked a little bit about 3PAR. We certainly talked a little bit about SimpliVity and their all-flash offerings. So what we're seeing is there's a couple things that are happening with these various waves, right? Wave one being performance. Wave two, you sort of see like Violin, 3PAR, and Pure start coming out. Wave three, essentially all flash all the time, data services, and a whole bunch of things that you're going to build on that foundationally. But what we saw was during the introduction of some of these concepts and products in the market, they are definitely having an effect on data protection availability. So a couple of things that when we talk to customers that are coming up more and more is from a performance standpoint, you've got shrinking to essentially 0 backup windows. And in addition to having a very, very small window from an SLA perspective, the requirement of not impacting your production system to take backups is becoming certainly a requirement. So that comes up more and more. The SLAs and the RPOs and RTOs are becoming very aggressive. Another area that we see is just from a chip breaks perspective, right? Software faults, hardware breaks, and you need to be able to, to architect around some of those things that happen. They do happen when we see, a large customer population in the tens of thousands, if not hundred thousands of units, right? Statistically, things break and you have to be able to mitigate against those risks. One of the things that we see is that there's a huge increase in application density per terabyte on physical infrastructure, right? So Flash has enabled you to essentially increase your fan out in terms of number of ESX hosts, the number of VMs and services you're going to pack on that specific one box, one physical piece of infrastructure. So the risk we've seen is that if you're not architecting solution for availability at the point of sale of, you're all moving to an all-flash architecture or just deploying these new systems, you're way behind the game and thinking that you can use some of the same techniques to achieve a similar RTO and RPO. Is we've just seen it over and over, practically speaking, where people have outages of, days, if not weeks, restoring from older technologies or expecting a very fast restore from tape. So that's very difficult. And then what I mentioned before is application integrated data protection. So we're just seeing a move away from people with essentially dedicated backup teams. So being able to do any of those things, application consistent snapshots, replication in DR, backup that's either integrated into the hypervisor or integrated into the app seems to be a big win for most people because you speak the parlance of the application and it can help out. So those are some of the things that we're helping design into our products and help understand there. So our philosophy is we're focused on a couple things. We talked about the application centricity. We're starting to see a number of different use cases in terms of snaps, replication, backup, reuse of data, all being munged together. A big focus on, instead of just backup, I'm going to back up the data, now actually having some prescriptive RPOs and RTOs assigned. One big thing that we're focused on is federating our platforms. So we start to see now customers buying not on traditional horizontal lines, right? So I'm going to get all my servers from HP, all my network from Cisco, all my storage from NetApp or EMC, rather buying more vertically oriented infrastructure that's going to be focused on a number of workloads or experiences, and being able to, for us, federate our primary storage and secondary storage is something that we think is important, and certainly providing secondary storage that's cloud ready, and I'll talk about Cloud Bank later. So from a philosophy standpoint, this is some of the tenets that we design our products with. So apps. So we talk a little bit about application protection. So one of the things that we do here, and one of the reasons why we've been very successful with 3PAR is essentially we have a technology, it's called Recovery Manager Central, and it's given us the ability to add data protection onto your primary platform, but sit within the framework of the application that you're running. So we have a number of plugins, whether it's for Oracle RMAN, SAP HANA, certainly in VMware within vCenter, Microsoft SQL. We got a whole bunch of other apps that we support as well too. This is basically integrating data protection in the app UI, right? So if you're in Oracle Admin, you can actually do data protection capabilities that go from your platform, your primary storage, through to your secondary storage, and then with Cloud Bank, will actually be able to go out to the cloud. So it's pretty powerful in terms of I'm essentially setting up physical infrastructure and handing over the operational piece of that to the admin. And it enables a number of different use cases. So rollback, business continuity, the concept of 3-2-1 with data protection. And then one of the things we're seeing is coming up more and more, I'll talk about this later, is the test dev copy reuse perspective and how that affects the ability to make copies of the data and reuse it for certain capabilities. We're building this in sort of a manner that is not greenfield, but rather brownfield. We understand that people have investments in certainly a number of different ISVs in this area, so we have an open framework, and I'll talk a little bit about some of our newer partnerships in this area. But we believe that providing this type of integration at the workload level with the primary storage is something that's significantly going to help the impact on the operational storage staff and bring those capabilities from data protection a little closer to the application admins. So I feel that that's a good thing. RMC is available today. We actually just released our 4.1 version with some new and cool stuff. So some of the things that we added this time is specifically around some capabilities with Veeam integration. Veeam is one of the fastest growing data protection and availability ISVs in the market, and we have a very good relationship. They influence a lot of HPE business and certainly a lot of Nimble business. There's quite a bit of overlap there, which is good. So what this allows us to do is one of the cool things about RMC in federating our primary and secondary platforms, it's easier, right? So you can essentially take all those activities and push them up to the admin perspective in that specific application. B, it's very fast and very efficient, right? So we understand the data layout between the primary storage and secondary storage. So we can essentially do very, very fast backups, 23 times faster than traditional methods of going over, IP networks. You actually get very, very fast restores, right? So you're only getting Delta level block restores over the storage area network. So you're essentially talking directly between your primary and secondary storage. And then we have an open ecosystem to be able to plug in some new stuff. So for example, when you use RMC and Veeam together, you get all the speed and ease of use from RMC, and then you can use things like, who's familiar with the Veeam application explorers? You guys use those at all? Yeah, so if you just download the Explorer, you can essentially back up from 3PAR directly to store once, or in the very near future, Nimble to store once. And then use your Veeam Explorers to go pick through the actual specific application data that's within the VM that's specific to the application. So we got a lot of cool stuff going on here around ease of use and certainly speed, and then definitely scale. So RMC is a very good technology. If anybody wants to try it out, we offer RMC in store once in completely software only in virtual machine editions, right? So you can try that out and download store once as well as RMC for free. We got some 1 terabyte licenses, so if anybody wants to try that out, you can talk to me afterwards. I'll get you some OVF images, and you can have at it. It's pretty good software. So RMC, in terms of where we're at today, we got a number of applications we support. We're adding more support for various hypervisors, and then taking a look at how we can support some specific use cases for persistent storage for microservices. As you may know, we've got a ton of plugins on both the 3PAR and the Nimble side for Docker, as well as Kubernetes, and I think we have some announcements imminently coming out around that. And a number of platforms. We support most of the platforms we have today with Nimble, and we're investigating how we can essentially create a similar data plane between 3-tiered architecture with servers and 3PAR servers and Nimble and SimpliVity, right, to be able to maybe use this as a platform to port workloads back and forth. So that's some areas that we're investigating as well. So RMC is pretty cool. And we've definitely minted some new partnerships in this space for folks that are growing in the market. As you know, we have spun off our HPE software division. Software titles in there include VM Explorer as well as Data Protector, right? So we actually resell their technology through the HPE to help with existing customers. We have a huge intersection of customers that use both Veeam and Zerto in the market for backup as well as for DR to the cloud. They maybe use both of them together. They use one or the other. We have a number of integrations, and we actually resell Veeam, and then we just added Zerto to our HPE Complete program as well too, so you can source Zerto applications through HPE. So we have a very open ecosystem, and we see a lot of growth in these areas. And we have a number of platform integrations with these ISV vendors. So a lot of cool new partnerships going on. I've been talking to some of the folks at Zerto quite a bit lately on how we can tie our products closer together. So in addition to some of the areas around availability that we're really focused on here is one of the things around data protection in general. It's not an ROI oriented discussion. It's more of a TCO, right? At the end of the day, my analogy is always, I don't want to pay my life insurance premium, right? Because if I were ever to derive utility from that, it would be a bad thing. Maybe not for my wife, but right. So essentially, I want to get that cost as low as possible, right? But with the maximum benefit, when I need it the most. So to get to the what we're starting to see is that's changing a little bit, right? So in general, where you've seen is around two vectors and two sales motions when we talk to customers around data protection. Sort of this established data protection solutions, right? I'm doing a whole complete re-architecture, a data center, or a data protection transformation. We have a very good and capable services division that can help customers along a very massive transformation in this area with backup ISVs. It's very application driven. We can do a lot of things around tagging and cataloging applications, what are their SLAs, and help customers move through that. Essentially, at the end of the day, it's usually not a technology question as much of as a services and play for our customers to understand, what are they looking for? How can we, affect availability at a large enterprise across multiple sites, thousands of applications, tons of servers, storage footprint, heterogeneous environments. So we do a lot of that. The other area that we see is, and these interactions are growing more and more for us. So the folks here that are solutions architects, work for VARs, these are some of the conversations that are driving a lot of open doors. Is around what people may call copy data management. So a sales motion that's coupled with your primary storage, application integration focused, and certainly around virtualization and DevOps. This is something that I've seen more and more of. And so what we're seeing here is that we want customers to be able to. This started with some of the service providers, right? You simplify their ops with commonality in the data center, right? And you're essentially providing a number of layers and stratified data services that form an SLA and a specific cost. So what we've been trying to do for our platforms is drive commonality across all of our platforms. So if you take a look at one view from an infrastructure manager, the UI for 3PAR, which is SSMC, Recovery Manager Central, right? And then Storefront Remote, which is going to be subsumed into InfoSite, for example. All the same UI, nice look and feel. And as we go along our maturity curve in this area, we're going to be smashing all those experiences together. So eventually you'll be able to do all of this from one console, either on-prem or off-prem. Or shall I say off-premises or on-premises. I don't want to hurt anyone's feelings here in terms of grammar and diction here. So we're really trying to simplify this whole experience for customers to provide a delivery of a service. And what we're finding is we have a lot of early adopters for RMC in this space who are service providers, right? And essentially what they want to do is they want to set it and forget it. And what this allows folks to do is establish these pre-configured levels of service on a per VM or a per data store or a per block of infrastructure. And we can set up some things like, here's your bronze level. That means that you get snapshots once a day, and then you can roll back from them, and it costs X, right? You get silver, that's snapshots and backup to a secondary system, and that's going to cost you 2X, right? And it's a little bit more granular in terms of how you take those those snapshots, those lines of delineation, right? Gold, snapshots plus DR plus backup, right? And then platinum, you get the whole kit and caboodle, right? You add archive in there, right? And so what that allows customers to do is, with one vertically oriented stack that's licensed it's all licensed per frame on the 3-PAR array, right? You get this whole capability built in, right? So you don't have to pay any extra. The software comes with it. It runs on box, and it can be completely driven through an automated levels of service. So essentially what we're providing someone is an environment that has quality of service. It has its multi-tenant, and it has all these service levels that you can configure and amortize as a customer. So this is it's a pretty advanced piece of technology, and it definitely scales for customers that are in the business of providing service levels to their customer base. And we've got a number of folks, and I can show you some. If anybody wants to talk to some customers and do some references, we have some really good use case and customer use cases in this area. So it all comes down from essentially automation. So everything that we do between that flow of primary to secondary storage and then ultimately out to the cloud for archiving can be driven through API. So all this stuff is available, right? And all these different types of capabilities. Automating snaps and remote copies, backup your point-in-time copy to a secondary system, life cycling of snaps, replicating backups efficiently between dedupe stores with different policies. I can present copies to a store once system or to an alternate system for recovery purposes. I can actually do it for reuse. And then we have a whole number of community projects around these APIs. So store once PowerShell, plugins for RMC for vRealize templates, visualization plugins. So there's lots of cool stuff that we can drive through and make it sort of when I talked in the beginning around integrated and invisible, right? This is some of the capabilities that allow us to do that. Okay, so one of the things that we're seeing is when I show that arrow that was going up in the air around different conversations, certainly in this area of quote unquote copy data management, people want to shift that conversation of TCO to ROI. Is essentially what they're trying to do, right? You've got dark data, captive data, make their backup data useful. There's a number of different things. So, some of the folks in the analysts, right? Folks want to do dev test and get some value from their backup, right? You want to leverage your backup for more than just operational recovery, right? So we're seeing folks who want to use these different types of infrastructure than not just sit there waiting for something to happen, right? So if you want to move, we actually talked about this earlier today, right? What do I want to do, right? I want to move secondary storage to all flash. What do you guys think about that? Too expensive? We're almost there soon. Soon enough?
I think there are certain models out there where the cost justification is real.
Yep. I think we're getting there. Mm-hmm. Crossover at some point. Or at least using some, like maybe in a hybrid model, definitely. But today it's still definitely, from a dollars and cents perspective, still pretty expensive. But I want to move all my secondary to the cloud, right? Tough, right, in terms of latency and cost of transfer, right? Still not a completely vetted, especially if you're moving from single terabytes to tens of terabytes to hundreds of terabytes, right? It's a lot of data to push. It's very costly to recover from a time perspective. Try a new standalone web appliance, web gateway, sort of file gateway, things like that. It's another silo to manage. Certainly another big risk area is around just waiting, right? My kids love reading the Dr. Seuss books, and the places you'll go, and they got that section, the waiting place, right? Just if you're gonna wait there, right, waiting for the water to boil, waiting for Uncle Jed or whatever it is, it's tough, right? Because there are certain costs in terms of supporting your legacy equipment. So a couple of things that we've that the team here has been very interested in checking out here is this concept of the nimble secondary flash array. So it solves a lot of these problems in terms of it's built on hybrid flash, right? So you don't have the all flash costs quite yet, right, to be incurred for secondary storage. It combines the performance of flash, but it also provides capacity optimization since you can still use HDDs in this platform. And it integrates with your existing environment in terms of you can use Veeam, you can use Commvault, and there's some other capabilities there, right? So the key is optimizing it for putting your data to work, flash enhanced, and it's very simple, right? From an administrative perspective, right? So couple of things that we're taking a look at here is capacity optimized. So when you want to essentially take all your secondary storage backup, DR, local archiving, and some secondary storage, you can put it on a similar platform. It lets you back up data for test dev. So essentially, it's performance enough and cheap enough, right, to run secondary workloads on. And combined with essentially some of our ISV capabilities with Veeam, where you've got IVMR, you've got a number of different features that allow you to take those workloads off primary and move them to secondary and run that there. It certainly helps you alleviate a bunch of the performance of backup verifications and a whole bunch of other tasks. And it also simplifies your data lifecycle management in some of these key areas. So we've seen a number of big wins lately that couple all flash arrays from Nimble with secondary flash. And I think this is a concept you're going to see over and over. And with that, when I talked about the stratification of the different layers in this area, certainly an area to watch around secondary flash. So specifically, we've done a number of things with Veeam as one of their top tier partners to help enable some really good use cases here, right? So you've got the secondary flash solution. We've got a ton of really deep integration with Veeam, right? So in terms of support, pull down menus, the ability to take snapshots and affect the control plane for replication, moving the workloads from your primary to your secondary flash. A ton of areas around here with validated design, documented deployment best practices. It works with the arrays, or actually other vendor arrays as well too, in this case, and you can actually source this whole solution from HPE now. So it's pretty advantageous in terms of you've got your compute, your networking, your backup ISV, your primary flash or secondary flash with services all wrapped in from HPE. So for folks who are very highly invested in this ecosystem, this is some pretty cool stuff to check out. And I would say that directionally, we've got a lot of things going on with Veeam, and Veeam 10 will show a number of more integrations across other platforms as well too that we'll be able to take a look at this. So backup from storage snapshots can certainly minimize your impact on production VMs, right? So helping you avoid some of the crushing performance drops that when you have to do restores. Simplify the scheduling. It's all agentless, right? Application consistent. Veeam Explorer for storage snapshots, we mentioned that before, so you get a very aggressive RTO and RPO, very granular recovery at a VM and sub-VM layer, and then instant visibility, right? So you're able to boot that VM off of secondary flash and essentially get right into it or actually run workloads. And one of the big things that we see is this on-demand sandbox. So verified your backups, right? It's one of the biggest issues we see on the market, not being able to understand whether those backups are good or not. Test dev training and troubleshooting around anything from new applications being deployed, patch management, a number of different use cases we see here, and then how to do low-risk deployments from a test perspective. So a lot of cool things we do here. Secondary flash, the product specs. It's pretty much what you see in a nutshell here in terms of connectivity, options, usable capacity, effective capacity. As you can see here, read-write IOPS are very good compared to something like a PBBA, right? PBBA optimized for cost and scale. This is certainly optimized for cost and performance. And then a number of on-box data services that you can utilize. So some pretty cool stuff here on the secondary flash. Some people ask, what does this look like over time from a dedupe and compression standpoint? So we're actually running a hybrid array with dedupe and compression turned on. So you've got a combination of flash and hard drives. And then, depending on your data, right? That always depends on what your mileage will vary, depending on the uniqueness of your data and sort of the delta change rate. But we've seen for, typical database and typical, certainly virtual machine workloads, the ability to get, 5 to, very high up in the reduction of actual data on disk from an efficiency standpoint. So it really helps out in the cost metric over time. I think I covered this a little bit before. So again, this is one of our largest service provider partners, Justin, over at Island. He's the CTO there. They've been a huge proponent of Nimble hybrid arrays as well as all flash. They have, provide a number of services around DR as a service. And so here's a good quote from him on what they're going to use secondary flash for. Okay. Any questions on SFA? It's kind of an interesting concept. Starting to see some big wins against some of the incumbents, certainly against Data Domain and other folks in this area. Okay.
Why is it winning out against Data Domain in some contexts?
So what we see is that from a customer perspective, the simplicity of being able to essentially move workloads from your primary array to secondary in this context of essentially Veeam, Commvault, there's some other ones, and be able to actually get not comparable, but pretty close from a data reduction standpoint. So it's the amount of space you save compared to a PVDA, which has definitely much more tuned and aggressive data reduction capabilities, but just the ability that they can run all those workloads on those systems with very good performance is one of the key pieces. So you're able to run the sandboxing, all the backup verification, some of the test dev workloads, all that, being able to run that, and it's a similar architecture to your primary array. You don't have to manage something else, so it's a win-win for the customer.
And you're maintaining as well the relationship as you are with Veeam, with Commvault and others. If someone has requirements that disallow Veeam from being an option for certain.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we've got a pretty big, extensive ISV ecosystem. If you take a look at, since we actually had our software, HPE software division spun off, we actually really don't have a horse in the race, right? From an actual backup software ISV perspective, we don't have it.
This has always been sort of an agnostic product to the backup ecosystem. You're still trying to align with the data products on the Micro Focus side, aren't you?
Yeah, so they're a big partner of ours, and we do a ton of integration work with them. We've got a lot of joint customers that run 3PAR, Data Protector, Store1, so we want to keep those folks happy. But we understand that it's a very large ecosystem, and that we're going to integrate our primary storage arrays and things like secondary flash and our targets, and with anybody and everyone that will integrate with our infrastructure.
That's right.
Yeah, for me, my product design philosophy has always been, if you lower the barrier to exit for a customer, right, they'll appreciate that, and you actually lower your barrier to entry for having a very large ecosystem that you can be a part of. So I guess I try not to build a ton of proprietary stuff that can't plug into other things, because ultimately at the end of the day you want to provide choice for your customers. Although I do see people buying on more vertical lines now. So one of the cool things that Calvin wanted to talk to me about today was some of our capabilities around hybrid IT or hybrid cloud storage. So right now we're actually in the middle of an early access capability for Store1 that we call Cloud Bank. And this is the ability to take your backup data and move it to the cloud, right? Or actually an on-prem object store, if that's something that you want to do for a scalability perspective or security perspective. But essentially, it's the ability to take a lower cost tier that runs in the public cloud, whether that's S3 or Azure Blob, and move that data from on-premises to off-premises for the purposes of cloud backup. And It's open and extensible, right? So the applications that you have running here for your ISVs, whether it's Veritas Net Backup, Data Protector, we mentioned a bunch of them today. You can cloud enable those ISVs, right, with StoreOnce. So whenever we're designing things, we're trying not to force people into greenfield situations, but support the environments that they have today. And enabling a bunch of flexibility in different scenarios for how you would use this. So the way it works is that...
Oh, can you go back a second?
Oh, yeah, sure.
It's just that was...
Yeah.
I do have one question regarding that. Those ones are configured in the GUI. You can go and select, I've got Azure. Here's my credentials.
Yep.
I can go Amazon. Can you create your own custom one? And that's just me asking, can I add Google Cloud Storage to this? That's basically the way I'm asking it.
Yeah, so for the public ones, we set up drop-downs that have some specific taxonomy because they have different...
The specific to each of them.
Yeah, specific to each of them. I can ask. I don't know if we've set up one for Google Cloud Storage at this point, but I can definitely find out.
Because I like the prices.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. At the end of the day, it's actually not a very complex model for us, right? Because the cool thing about object storage is that it's very simple, right? The annoying part about it in terms of it's very simple, right? In terms of, you're essentially using 4, HTTP protocols to do stuff to manipulate data. And when you start to overload those functions, it becomes very complex, right? So we're actually just using it as essentially a transport mechanism to put and get, and be able to stat we have an object model for storage within StoreOnce to put that data up in the cloud, essentially. So there's really no reason. It's actually just a test in qual. So I can find out for you what that would take.
I love that.
Yeah. So we've essentially just focused on Azure and S3 because essentially S3 is sort of de facto from a protocol standpoint.
That's what your customers are asking.
That's what they're asking for, yep. And then it's easy for us we have a partner I'll talk about later on today, Scality, that provides essentially an open source S3 server that you can go test against, for example, if you want to go try that out. Some pretty cool technology. And then Azure is actually, Microsoft is a very large partner of ours, and we have a big intersection with customers on that front. And we have other capabilities where we allow, for example, StoreOnce as a virtual storage appliance to run in Azure. So we've got a lot of cool things we can do with CloudBank and StoreOnce all running together.
Hey, Patrick.
Yeah.
Chris asked on Twitter again, what's the dollar a gigabyte of secondary flash compared to primary?
Oh, off the top of my head, I don't know. I can get it for him, though. I can definitely get it for him. For Chris, it's double. I don't know off the top of my head. Essentially, it's the difference between you could spec out a nimble hybrid array, right, versus an all flash. Essentially, that's what you're getting. The calculations become interesting when you throw in dedupe and compression and how much you can dedupe and compress your data. So it's kind of a how long is a piece of string question in some respects. But I can follow up with them.
Thank you.
Okay, cool. Thanks. So CloudBank, what happened?
What a right button.
Okay, so what we're supporting today this is going to be GA at the end of this calendar year. And you can essentially write out to Azure and Amazon. And then on-premise, we're going to support Scality, but essentially if you have an S3 target, it'll support it for the most part. And what it allows us to do is essentially move data from 3PAR, right, through RMC, right, to a StoreOnce system on-prem. This could be either an actual physical appliance that starts off very small, or you can be a giant scale-out version, or it can actually be just a VMware version of it, VM version of it, that runs in a VM. You can start at 1 terabyte and scale up to much larger, and then out to the cloud, right? And there's some different capabilities that I'd like to point out about CloudBank that is very interesting. So a couple things that we'll allow to do is essentially this whole workflow will be able to be run from 3PAR, right? So you can essentially like create volumes and then say, I want to back them up locally, and send them out to the cloud based on a retention period in a schedule, which is pretty cool, right? And then there's some other capabilities around Cloud Bank that are really interesting. So I can keep some data local to the 3PAR if I want, snap data for very, very rapid restore. If for some reason your 3PAR becomes a smoking crater, right, you can restore locally from a store one system to either an alternative target, right, or you can do rollback from the store ones. So it's always good to maybe have that secondary system on-prem for rapid restores. And then essentially after a certain amount of time, I can store all those backups in the cloud, and I can do a couple different things, which is interesting. I'll show you this real quick. Hold on. I'll build this out. So from a cost perspective, think about is that you've got flash for storing your snaps. You've got backup to a dedupe hybrid flash, sort of tier 1.5, run workloads. You've got store ones, essentially, which is a on-prem data protection target. And then you've got this tier that I'm talking about here, right, which is Cloud Bank and what we call detached Cloud Bank, right? So you can archive your backups to an online object, which is pretty cheap from a cost perspective. And then actually we have this concept of you can actually detach these Cloud Bank stores, and they sit there in the cloud and you don't touch them. So there's no HTTP or networking access charges. And you're just sitting there paying your, dollars, cents per gigabyte per month, and it just sits there. It's almost the same concept of tape, right? So for a lot.
Is that involved with Sharp Glacier, or is that?
Yep, absolutely. It's just an object, right? So you can have that be basically demoted, right, to a lower tier over time, and it becomes very, very, very cheap, right? So one of the things that we do with this detachment is in the case of a store one system going away or a whole primary site, all these objects, they're self-describing in the cloud, so that I could actually reattach a new system, and it can be a completely different heterogeneous system. Could be an appliance, could be a VSA, and I can restore them from anywhere else. So the actual data itself is self-describing. I can go and restore. I can actually, if the store once on-prem goes away, I can restore directly to the 3PAR. So there's a lot of different use cases we've designed into it. And one of the key capabilities is what we call Express Restore. It will understand what is on-prem and what is off, and you're not doing fully hydrated restores, which is a big thing in terms of moving any sizable data set back and forth.
It's always been site to site where it knows what data sets where it's supposed to sit.
In some cases,
even more accurately, because
It's typically in the past been an on-premise type solution.
yes.
It's known what data sat on which array.
Yes.
So in that way, location sensitivity has been in place.
Yes, it is. And then we're sort of taking it to the nth degree in terms of now it's self-describing, and you can push it off somewhere else for the purposes of very long-term archival. That's not, some people just don't want to deal with tape anymore, essentially, for lots of different reasons. So just kind of gives you an idea of what data age, retention period, what you want for these different type of solutions versus price and the amount of data stored, okay? Go back. So really some of the plays for us for Cloud Bank, which I find very interesting, is that you can protect quite a bit of data at very, very low cost for an extended period of time. It's very efficient in terms of reducing the amount of storage capacity required, as well as the bandwidth utilization to go from point A to point B and then point B and back. It's flexible in terms of it works with a number of our arrays, whether they're virtual, single node, or scale out, and a different number of different public and private services. And it's very secure, so you can mitigate that risk from a security standpoint. Simple, it's encrypted on disk. It's also encrypted in flight, and can provide a very reliable disaster recovery solution. So Cloud Bank is one of the things that we're taking a look at, and we're also taking a look at how we can integrate that with some of the experiences that Doug talked about earlier with Nimble Cloud Volumes. As you can see, you could probably put 2 and 2 together on how those things could be used together.
Hey Patrick, real quick, Chris said the stream had froze up at the most inopportune moments. He said he assumed that you said that the Cloud Bank images are self-describing.
Yes. Yep. Yeah, the Cloud Bank data itself has metadata and a payload, right? So you can associate metadata, and it's a very small amount compared to the actual payload data. So you only have to read in a little bit, and you can essentially rebuild what all of your archive data looks like.
And there's always a store once that sits between the Cloud Bank and the primary storage.
Yes, but your store one system can be a VM, and it can be very, very small amount of data that you have to hold in that. And then we're also taking a look at, ultimately, we'll be smashing a lot of these layers of infrastructure together in the product. So maybe that's a service that runs on 3PAR or runs on Nimble. I don't know, and we'll see. There's advantages and disadvantages to that. What are you doing?
One button. Yep.
Okay, so when we talked earlier today about setting the stage from a point of view standpoint, so we talked about predictable, right? So we're trying to provide predictable data protection and availability solutions that are very focused on RTO and RPO, running a number of different workloads. Cloud ready, right? Which we talked a little bit about here. Obviously, Cloud Bank is a huge case of that, and one of the things we're really working very diligently on is giving an experience for our array users to be able to manage data protection and availability from the UI of that primary array or the application through its lifecycle. So primary, secondary, all the way out to cloud, right? So that's an aspirational goal that we want to deliver this year. And then on the timeless, we talked about timeless in terms of investments. One of the things that we are doing a really good job at right now is providing consumption models for all of our products and solutions that are based on consumption metrics. Flash Now is an area that we can provide for a number of our products. Essentially, this allows you to provide all flash on-prem at a dollars per month, gigabyte per month metric. And there's some things that are specific to data protection here as well too. So for an additional 1 cent a month on top of that all flash, that Flash Now program, you can add everything I just talked about, okay, on that metric as well, right? So we start at, I think some of the most aggressive pricing that we have on some of the models for all flash is 3 cents per gig per month. And then you add another additional cent on that, and then you get all the data protection capabilities that I just reviewed. And included in that price are automated and free data migration, right? And some of the peer capabilities we have. The uptime guarantee that we talked about, flash integrated application protection, right? So all these things built in, and it's pretty flexible. So you can go and choose your array. You can embed your fabric and your data protection. So not only the networking, but you get the data protection portion as well too. Determine your migration strategy from where you're coming from and where you're going to go. You can choose your consumption model. We've got some pretty flexible terms in terms of pay now, pay as you grow, pay as you go, a number of different models there, and then repeat over and over. And we've made some acquisitions in this space with Cloud Cruiser, right? We've got some advisory capabilities with cloud technology partners for people that want to, definitely architect private cloud or hybrid cloud within their framework. So a lot of things in this that you'll see from us continue in this model around providing very flexible cloud-like consumption capabilities for our platforms. Okay, this is good business for our customers. It's good business for us. So just to revisit some of the things that we are focused on, application centricity, very focused in that area. A number of different use cases that I talked about: secondary flash, rapid restore, the use of object storage, whether it's on premises or off premises, as a cloud bank capability for archiving. Federating all of our platforms, making sure that when you buy an integrated stack, it works from your hypervisor through servers to your primary, secondary, all the way down through the pike, and then being cloud ready. So those are some of the areas that we're invested in from a technology stack perspective, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that you guys may have about where we're going with some of these capabilities.
It's not a question, but I would say since my last view of Store Once, it's very interesting to see the direction it's taken. And it really is viewing data as a life cycle entity. I think NetApp might have referred to it as data as fabric. Forgive me for bringing up the competitor in the space, but it really is a movement towards the future of how we need to look at these things, how recoverable, how granular that data needs to be. I think it's moving in the right direction.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I think there's certainly some opportunities for us, right? I can't disclose a lot of future product plans, but certainly a lot of the things that I talked about for 3PAR will be extended for Nimble. It's just a natural. That is a thing that we're working on right now, because I personally am of the opinion that it's not an either-or conversation around HCI and three-tiered architecture, right? They are tools in a bag that can be applied in various different ways. And if we provide customers the ability for have those architectures work together seamlessly. So I think some of the areas that SimpliVity architecture could benefit from here is certainly around portability of workloads, right, between different parts of the infrastructure.
Solve a lot of those issues on their own.
Yeah, absolutely. But being able, we've had customers that say you are a 3PAR customer and, you've got, big VM real estate running on 3PAR, which we definitely have a lot of those customers, right? And they want to run that in the core data center, and they've got a number of other sites that want to use SimpliVity, for example. Why can't, from a data services perspective, those two architectures work together, right? From a portability standpoint, DR, backup, right? So there's some things there I think that are layups, from a product design perspective. So I think there's a lot of opportunities in those areas, and we definitely want to. I do tip of the hat to the competitors. That data fabric concept is pretty cool in terms of being able to describe, but that's certainly where we want to go. The data is very, very important to us. Yes.
On the voice of Chris, he said, so for Cloud Bank charging appears to be 0.001 gigabyte a month to manage the metadata as the data is in the cloud. Is that correct?
That's metadata and data. Yeah, so the way we license Cloud Bank is essentially when you have a Store Once or a 3PAR device, you essentially it has X amount of capacity, and then we'll allow you to license up to, I believe it's 3X that amount of capacity out in the cloud, right? So that'll cover quite a bit of your archiving requirements that'll sit out there. And the data that we send out to the cloud is already compressed and deduped and, munged up and basically compacted as much as we possibly can. We've got some pretty good algorithms in terms of we built in a ton of data aware data structure, so we understand how most of the ISV data is laid out. Certainly with applications, whether it's virtual machines, file systems, databases, so we got a lot of meaning aware capabilities within the dedupe and compression pipeline. So we pretty much take out as much of that out as possible, and then you're storing it up in the cloud. And then after it gets demoded, you get to a very, very low price point for storage at rest up in the cloud. But we're essentially licensed it on the frame.
Is Store Virtual no longer being built on? So I understand support is going to be remaining in place for a while, but with the HC380 as a platform no longer necessarily being built, being refreshed, being added to.
Yeah, so Store Virtual is still, an offering that we have in the market. We still have a number of customers that use it, specifically in the VSA format. But I'd say the bulk of our engineering investments are being, put on 3PAR, Nimble, and SimpliVity from that perspective. I don't have a date in terms of when SimpliVity would be available, from an architecture standpoint in software, and deployed on, just standard DL ProLiant based stuff. But I'm sure that's something that's being investigated aggressively on how we can bring that to market.
All right, I've consumed too much of your time.
No, questions are great.
Those were two interesting questions today from you, Matt.
Yeah.
Two.
There was one earlier.
That never happens.
Two. Yeah, quotas.
That's real stupid when there's a balance.
Like normal.
Yeah. But Store Virtual is a great product. It definitely served its purpose within HPE. We have a lot of customers. If from like an architecture standpoint, there are a lot of things that we don't have on Store Virtual, right? That are never going to get built into that architecture right now. Specifically, inline or even post-process dedupe and compression, and just people expect that, that type of capability, and we're not going to be able to deliver that on Store Virtual. There's people that want to use it as a very inexpensive iSCSI SAN, right? And we use that for a number of capabilities. People want to use it as the ability to conglomerate a bunch of capacity across servers for the purposes of providing storage for VMware. Yeah, totally. It absolutely works if you want to repurpose gear. So we don't have any plans right now to not offer it. So it's still it's out there.
The development is taking place like it needs to.
Yeah.
I mean, there had been some significant progress made.
Yep.
Finally, right after Left Hand sort of went to sleep on the HP at the time side.
Yeah.
Suddenly we saw these hyper-converged builds, the 250 and the 280 and the 380, and these were rocking architectures.
Yeah.
And then came the SimpliVity acquisition, and the question amongst the people I spoke to that had leveraged that product is what does that mean for us? Because the DL 380 used in an HC 380 is not the same entirely as the SimpliVity model. We've got that. Not exactly, yeah. That OmniCube card makes a big difference.
So we have upgrade programs for customers that want to move to SimpliVity architecture. So there's ways that services and financially will make it much easier for them to deploy in that manner if they want, right? And help them along that path. But for us, HCI from an investment standpoint clearly sits on the SimpliVity architecture. Yeah.
From a user's perspective, I would have to say SimpliVity is the absolute winner over HC380.
Yep. Yeah. Great team.
Cool.
You're just saying that because I'm here.
No, I don't care about you.
I think with both acquisitions, for us, I actually had the privilege of working on both of them. So they were all along three prongs in terms of it came with an incredible team from an engineering perspective and great product. So it was good technology and a good team that built it. Certainly a really good and established go-to-market in terms of good sales teams, people that understand how to bring their customers along. Yeah, absolutely. And it came with a great customer base. So both Nimble and SimpliVity fit those bills, and it's been great to work with these guys. Awesome. Well, thanks for everyone's time. I hope that was insightful. And if anybody has any questions, you know where to find me in the Twitterverse.